Okay, now I've done enough weird things.
Welcome to this episode of the Altogether Beautiful podcast. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Taylor.
And today we are actually releasing this teaser for you. Yay! Because we are so close. On Sunday is our official release.
Yeah.
But we will have 3 episodes coming out for you, like, right off the bat, right?
Ooh,
so,
yeah.
But today we wanted to explain kind of the unfolding of the Altogether Beautiful podcast and like how it came to be. So,
take it away, Rachel.
All right, I'm going to start off here with my side of it, and then we'll kind of go back and forth here to kind of show you the behind the scenes on both of our parts. Mm-hmm. So, and don't mind me if you're watching the video, you'll see I'm like flipping through. I have a journal of like this, and I've written out my timeline so I don't get things screwed up, because there's so many details in how this unfolded. Like, God revealed little thing after little thing, and it's just kind of cool to see how he orchestrated it. So,
for sure.
So my side starts off back in November of 2020, and it was a Friday night that I was going to family night, and it was, this family night is just like a little gathering in somebody's house, and it's a friend of mine, and they just have a time of worship. Someone shares whatever God has laid on their heart, like through the text or whatever God wants to speak that night. And then after that, they have a time to give fresh words from the Lord. So they truly believe in God giving like words in the moment for somebody. And so this time was set up, and at first he was asking anybody who had never received a word from the Lord, like a fresh word from the Lord, that they would come up. And I think I have, so I didn't raise my hand. But then that I sat there through several people's, and it was just cool to watch people receive these fresh words. But at this point, I was so tired and like worn out from things that were happening in my life that my friend who invited me to family night knew this, and she felt God putting on her heart that she didn't want me to leave without getting a fresh word.
Right.
So she asked me to come up, and so they had me sit in the front of the room, and then I could close my eyes or do whatever I wanted, so it didn't feel awkward to me.
Yeah.
And so I just sat there with like my head down, my eyes closed, and you just kind of wait. Like, you just wait for like the Lord to say something. And her husband actually gave me a word. There were many people who gave me words that were so accurate to like my life at the moment.
And something that you said, like, so many of those people had never met you before.
Yeah.
And they had no idea what was going on in your life.
Yeah.
Which I think that was something that it's like, oh my gosh, like, you cannot deny like the Holy Spirit moving through his people when it's like, I've literally never met you before, you don't know me.
Yeah.
But yet there was something that was so heavy on my heart that you specifically talked about. Oh goodness, my watch just went off. Let me silence that, guys. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there were so many people that I didn't know that gave me words, and there were people who I knew as acquaintances but didn't know the details of my life that gave me words that were detailed to my life. And it was just kind of like, okay, yeah, like you said, I can't deny that is not the Lord.
Right.
But her husband gave me a word, and it was weird because all of them really like related to me in that moment. Like, I could instantly pick up like what they were talking about.
Yeah.
But I was confused, I'll be honest. He said,
you're like, what the heck are you like saying right now? Like, this makes no sense.
Yeah, he said that I had a dream about 6 months ago, like a not a dream as in like when I slept at night, but something that I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
So I had a dream about 6 months ago, and for whatever reason, I had laid it down, but God was asking me to pick it back up. But he was going to take me through a new lane, and I would seek God first, and then all these things will be added to you. And then he also said, I believe you know in part as to what that is. But I would seek him first, and it would be through a new lane.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. And he, even at the end, he was like, does that make sense? And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. But I'm trying to think of what you're talking about.
Just kind of like, sure, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I pondered it all the way home, and even like when I laid down in bed and then the next morning. And it wasn't until I was on my way to work that next morning that it clicked with me. So 6 months ago, I was supposed to start an aesthetics business. I had a place with a few other girls. We had already signed the contract for the lease.
Yeah.
We had already started ordering things for our space, and I'd already bought a couple things for our space, and then COVID happened. So it kind of put everything on hold. And when I realized that, I kind of had a giggle, because he kept saying like, you had a dream like 6 months ago, and I don't know why you put it down. Like, I can't figure out why you put it down, but you put it down. And I was like, it was a pandemic.
COVID.
Yeah. A global pandemic did it.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. But so yeah, I realized that on Saturday morning on my way to work. So Friday night, went to family night. Yeah. Saturday morning on my way to work, figured out that I had put down the dream of my aesthetic business.
Right.
And then this leads us to, we want to kind of give background to Taylor's part now. So Taylor, what was happening with you before we carry on with my side?
I'm going to go back all the way to October. Okay. So in October, I was feeling this weird tension in my relationship with the Lord. Very, very weird tension. And some of that had to do with whatever struggle I was going through at that time, which I believe we touch on in one of the episodes on Sunday. And I was just going through it. And I also felt like where I was in my relationship with the Lord and how I was serving him, I felt like it was changing, but I didn't know like what it looked like, and I couldn't even describe what it was. And with all of the struggles that I was going through spiritually and emotionally, and a lot of questions that I had for God and a lot of emotions I was feeling towards the Lord, I almost felt, and I haven't shared this with you, but I almost felt like I was being called to a season of silence, which is very ironic.
Yeah.
So back in October, I felt like I was being called to a season of silence where I might be behind the scenes serving, but I felt like it was in a time where I was being called just to sit and still be working, still be serving the Lord, but not in a vocal way. And
for those of you who don't know, she's a worship leader. So our other ones haven't come out yet, so you might not know that yet.
Yeah, so I'm a worship leader at my local church, and
so you're called to the season of silence. Yeah,
and it was weird, and we had a conference at our church in October, and we had some people come from out of town, and they were kind of pouring into us, and we were in this, it was in between a session or something of some sort, and my mom my dad's a pastor at my church. Since we haven't released a lot of episodes, we don't really, some of you guys know me, but a lot of you know Rachel. So she was talking to me about how she was encouraging me, like, hey, you have this gift and you are good at what you do, and da-da-da-da-da. And I was just having a really down week, really, really bad time. And I told her then, I was like, I just don't feel like this is where I'll always be. And at that moment, I was really confused, and I felt like I was being called to a season of silence. And it was just weird. It was weird. And I'm laughing now because I realized God was telling me to do the exact opposite of what I was feeling.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, I felt really passionate about the Lord, and I always felt like I was being called to speak, but yet not in the typical form of speaking or teaching about the Lord, like,
Yeah.
and not necessarily, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, not in a normal mode, but I'm like, okay, Lord, it's weird. I feel like I'm supposed to not just worship in song, but also worship in words, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense. But I was like, but I know it's not this. I know it's not this.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. It was just
Mhm.
something where I was just like, it just doesn't feel like that's the lane I'm supposed to be going right now. So I just don't know what. And so I think it's funny where it was a time where I literally actually said out loud, I feel like I'm being called to a season just to be quiet and just to like rediscover who the Lord is and all of this. And he was actually calling me to do the opposite. But I didn't know that. And that same month where I was feeling this tension of I just don't know why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, something's changing, I don't know what. That's when Scott had come up to me and I was talking to him like about all of these questions I was having.
Mhm.
And he was like, well, have you ever thought about, just starting an app? I'm like, yeah, maybe, I think so, but I don't really know, because I don't know the slightest clue on how to like do any of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so we kind of rested on that for a few days, and then all of a sudden he comes up to me with like tears in his eyes, and like we don't all know Scott. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. We know Scott.
Yeah.
But he is not an emotional guy, and he does not cry.
Yeah.
Nothing makes him teary-eyed, except for one thing now, which we realize what that is.
Yeah.
And I think at some point I would love for him to share what he experienced, but I think that is a story that he should tell.
Yeah,
and
we
not I
should have our
tell.
husbands tell a story one day.
Yeah. And so he came up to me as I was sitting at the kitchen table, just living in the tension of I am frustrated, Lord, and I really don't know like what I'm supposed to be doing. And he's like, you should start a podcast. And I was like, no. And then he's like, no, I'm being serious. You should really start a podcast. And I was just like, yeah, that might be somebody else's lane, but it's definitely not mine.
Yeah.
And the conversation just kind of fizzled out. Nothing happened. And I kid you not, all I could think about was starting that podcast. And it was something I didn't even want to do. And I said, I don't want to do it. And that's not my thing. That's not what the Lord's calling me to. But yet, every single moment of almost every single day, it was just back there in the back of my mind, just sitting there. Like, I don't want to say it was rotting a hole in my brain, but yes, it kind of was, if that's the only way for me to describe it.
Yeah.
And so I just kept thinking about it. And I'm like, but I don't want to do this. This doesn't even sound like fun. Like, it literally does not sound like fun.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there still thinking, like, Lord, you called me. I feel like I still need to be silent, Like,
yeah.
Lord, I feel like it's just time for me just to be silent. Like, wrong. So anyways, I mean, I'm being humorous, but, like, really, truly, like, that's God's sense of humor is just funny. I think where it's, like, the one thing we say no to, it's like, okay, well, are you going to say yes to me?
Yeah.
So, then that was really it.
Okay.
There was no divine crazy thing that happened other than what Scott said to me.
Yeah.
And what Scott had said to me was something that I really truly feel like the Lord gave him.
Mm-hmm.
And you were also a part of that as well. But once again, I want him to be able to share that story at some point. And that is his story, because that's something that the Lord gave him. And I don't want to give that away when the Lord gave that to him first and foremost. So then that was when I was sitting there that morning, and I was just like shaky. That Saturday morning that you were talking about, I was just shaky and just like, God, why won't you leave me alone on this? Like, I said I didn't want to do this, and I feel like I'm supposed to be quiet right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And for somebody that, like, I feel like the Lord gave me the gift of gab, like, like, oh, now it's time for you to be quiet. What? Okay. And then that's when I literally was just like, I feel like I need to text Rachel and just ask her if she would want to co-host a podcast sometime with me.
Yeah.
And
so he did.
That's literally, I have no cool story like yours.
Oh,
I mean,
well,
it's
that's not true.
Well, it's just like, you have all of these like perfect alignment timing, and I'm like, literally, Scott said something, it rotted into my brain, and then the Lord wouldn't let me sleep on it, and then I sent you a text.
Yeah.
That is the very short version that I could have just given you like 5 minutes ago.
No, that's okay. No, that's good. I like hearing it all.
Oh my god.
And actually, there were multiple times where, like, I want to say at least 2 or 3 times that Scott had mentioned a podcast in front of me as well, like to you. He was talking to you. And
but
he was
you
like,
were also in the room present. You were hearing.
And he was like, you should do a podcast. And in my head, I was thinking, ooh, that sounds like fun. Like, because we talk for hours on end. And I was like, ooh, that would be fun to do together. Like, you're the one person I think I could do that with. And then I was like,
because I won't shut up.
Yeah, you love to talk. It's fine. It's a good quality to have, especially
Unashamed.
when somebody doesn't want to talk.
Unashamed.
Yes. But anyway, so yeah, I was sitting in the room and I would think to myself, oh, that sounds like fun, but then I was talking myself out of it. One, I was like, I don't want to take that from her if he feels like that's something she should do. But then also, I was thinking, that's not something that I could do. Like, that's definitely not something that I could do. And so anyway, that's really interesting. But yeah, so that Saturday morning that I realized that I was supposed to start my business 6 months ago, 2 hours after I had realized that, Taylor texted me and asked me if I wanted to start a podcast. So,
and it was just the most. I was like, I couldn't. Like, I just couldn't relax.
Yeah.
And so I'm just gonna sit and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then that's when.
And I texted her back and I was like, sure.
It was almost like an immediate response, which it surprised me because you're working.
Yeah.
I was just like,
no, I was in my car. I remember I was in my car. I think I didn't have a client at that moment. So I was in my car and you texted me. And it was weird. As soon as you sent it, I was like, I got all giddy inside and I was like, ooh, she asked me. And so,
who else would have I asked?
Yeah. But anyway, okay, so I have it written down so I don't forget the details of this because, like,
there was a lot.
Like she was saying, yeah, there's quite a few details to how it played out. But, okay, so Taylor texted me this, and then that same, like, after that had happened, I was thinking, like, okay, Lord, like, so in that word that you gave the guy who told it to me, like, you said that it was going to be through a new lane and that I would seek him first. And that I knew in part as to what it was. And I was thinking about it in the podcast thing, and I was like, I was like, okay, this could be the new lane. And when we talked about the podcast, we knew that we wanted to bring it back to Jesus.
Right.
So, like, every episode, we brought it back to Jesus. But the one part I couldn't get rid of and couldn't figure out was, he said, I believe in part as to what that is. And this was not on my radar at all. So I was like, okay, is this it, Lord? Like, because that doesn't make sense because this wasn't on my radar. Yeah. So how could I know in part?
Right.
So I started praying about it that week. And that weekend is when I think it was like maybe the next weekend, we sat down and we were like, let's just record one just for fun.
Well, you say that we said, let's just record one, but it was you. There's just like, why don't we just try it? And I was like, for real? Like, okay, like, okay, let's do this. And then because we didn't have soundproofing done in the room yet. And so, and where we record is always in our house. Like Scott and I's house. And
we have tons of kids.
Yeah. All 4 kids were there and present. We were just hanging out. And so we're like, okay, well, we got to find a way to soundproof something. So sometimes you might hear my kids in the background.
Yeah.
Because they're here, they're hanging out. But so we're like grabbing blankets
and
pillows, cushions from the the couch
Olaf.
downstairs.
We should have brought Olaf in
today. Man, we'll have to post a picture of our friend Olaf.
Yeah.
Man. Well, actually, no. If you go to our Facebook, if you go through the pictures, he's there in the background, like a little creeper in the back. But our stuffed because
I think
all
is
the
that
stuffed
picture
animals.
from that night.
It was from that night.
Okay.
Because I felt like. I was like, we should take a picture for the first one.
Yeah.
And it was so weird because, like, in that moment, like I felt from the Lord like this is not the last one. This is the first of many.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is the first one. We should take a picture of this moment.
Yeah.
And
I'm so glad you did too.
And I was like, dude, I think I was like on day 3 of not washing my hair. And
my makeup was like all worn off because it was like late at night.
It was late. It
Yeah.
was late. It was
Yeah.
super late. And like the kids were still like
Yeah.
up and at it, still going. And then there's Olaf in the corner.
Yeah.
You know.
So yeah.
Sorry, ADD baby.
No. So we sat down, mind you, I'm still praying, like, Lord, is this like what you want?
Yeah.
And we talked about what we were gonna name the podcast. And I was, for some reason, like, we kept going back and forth on like what we were gonna name it. And I was like, I feel like it's just gonna come to us and we'll just know.
Yeah.
And so we sat down for that first podcast, and we knew we wanted it to be on identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were talking about like our favorite verses for identity. We are just like trying to navigate it, trying to figure it out. And I was like, oh, that reminds me, I love this verse from Song of Solomon 4:7. And I started reading it, and in that moment I was just like shook. I was like,
you cried.
Yeah, I definitely cried.
I told on you. You
cried.
cried.
I cried.
You were shook and you cried.
Yeah, I was just like so blown away. So that verse says, "You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you."
Mm-hmm.
And my aesthetic business was supposed to be called Altogether Beautiful. So it was this perfect alignment of like, we're sitting down to I knew in part. You're sitting down to record your first podcast, and you come across this verse without even thinking about it, and like, we just had a moment. We just sat there for a minute, and you were like, I remember you were so supportive, because your heart and your desire is for this to be for all people, and like both genders, and whoever, anybody and everybody. And I felt like God was saying it was supposed to be called Altogether Beautiful. But in that moment, I knew it was going to be hard for you, because you wanted it to be for both genders. We're using the word beautiful in the name. And you were like, no, if you think that's it, that's it. And so
I remember thinking that, because I was just like, I was like, because I think, and it was so funny, because at first what like I was toying with in my mind was, and this will make sense in a second. Well, when on Sunday, so when we release all those episodes on Sunday, it'll make sense. But I'm kind of like, as you're talking about all of this, all of a sudden it's like coming back, and I'm remembering.
Yeah.
Like at first I was like, first love, but I don't really know. But our first episode that we talk about, well, it'll make sense later, guys, when you listen. It'll make sense. So, but then when you said Altogether Beautiful, and you were all of a sudden like with tears in your eyes, you're just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. It looked like you were like literally like.
That kind of is giving me chills,
like,
thinking about like the first episode, because we realized like after a couple recordings and everything that first episode just wasn't solid. It wasn't what God wanted it to be. No. And so we decided to re-record the first episode and go off of what God was asking us to do for that first episode. And it's kind of crazy to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Now.
So we didn't end up calling our podcast First Love, but it was still something that I feel like the Lord was really impressing
in that moment,
for what would happen later on.
Yeah.
And so anyways, but when I was seeing like, when you're having like, it was like literally like the way your eyes looked in that moment was almost like a disbelief, but you were like in awe and wonder, like, oh my gosh. And then that's when I was like, okay, well, obviously this is something we cannot deny here.
Yeah.
This is obviously the Lord doing this. So I'm like, so if this is what you feel like the Lord's telling you, then like, that's it. That's what we call it. That's what we call it. That's it. Period. You know? So anyways.
So that's how the name came to be.
Yeah.
And that's how Altogether Beautiful was like formed. But even still after that, like there's so many things that came after that kind of just emphasized it even more, and like just embedded the idea and the vision even more, I guess.
Like you couldn't deny that God was
moving and making things work.
Yes.
So that next Wednesday after we recorded our first podcast, I was at work so I work Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
And that next Wednesday, I was sitting at work. It was probably around 2 to 4 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing a facial, and during my facials, it's really quiet. And there's typically, unless the person wants to talk, you're not talking. So it's a lot of room to think. And I was actually completely zoned out. Like, for once in my life, I feel like I kind of understand a man's brain when they say they're not thinking about anything. I really was
literally
not
thinking nothing.
Yeah, I was literally not thinking a thing. And
Oh
I
my
can
gosh.
even envision the moment in my mind, what I was doing when I felt the Lord say, clear as day, your time is done here.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't thinking about anything else. Quitting my job was not at all on my radar.
Right.
Like, I was planning to be there for a while.
Yeah.
Like, I had no end in sight for that.
Well, and you were happy there.
I was happy.
Yeah.
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 And I, clear as day, heard the Lord say, your time is done here. And I knew it was from him because, one, it wasn't on my radar. And two, like she said, I was happy. Like,
Mhm.
I had no reason to want to leave. Like,
yeah.
it actually hurt my heart. And, like, I cried several times
Yeah,
thinking
because you
about
said, like,
leaving.
your owner, like, at the, like, place you're working at, like, they were so good and so kind to me.
Yeah.
So, and they've given me so much flexibility in my schedule.
Yeah.
Like, why would I want to leave? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
not to mention, like, I mean, like, for you having a flexible, like, schedule, you also
Mhm.
had an income that was supporting you.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Like,
And, like, it just, I don't know.
you
It's
had no
just-
reason to want to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, like, not something that I had been thinking about at all.
Mhm.
And I was just kind of like, whoa, Lord.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Whoa.
Did I hear that right? But I, like, sat on that and I knew it was the Lord, and I was terrified to tell my husband. I was like,
Yeah.
there is no reason for me to quit. Like,
Yeah.
in my mind, I was thinking, like, we can still do the podcast and me work because, like
Yeah.
I said, I was only working 2 days a week.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I didn't have the time to do it.
Right.
I was like, I have the time to be working.
Yeah.
So why would I quit? So I knew telling him, he's like a big money guy and he loves to save and
Mhm.
increase what we have as much as he can.
Yeah.
So
I mean, he was the one who was, like, always like, I remember this, like, hey, you want to go do this? No, we're trying to get out of debt.
yes, yeah.
So it's not like he's like, I'm just trying to grow what we have, but
Yeah.
I mean, he is smart with his
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
Okay.
And we were out of debt
Good
at
for
this
him.
point.
Good for him. Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
you're out of debt at that point.
Yeah, we were out of debt, but I was still
Yeah.
scared because I lived with him for the past like 5 years
Yeah.
trying to get out of
Yeah.
debt. So I didn't know how he would respond, and I didn't think it was going to be well.
Yeah.
So later
And
that
it's not because he's controlling. It's literally
No.
because for people who don't know him,
yeah,
for people who don't know him, it wasn't because he wants to have this strong sense of control
No.
over what happens, but literally just we're trying to be smart. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So anyways,
and I knew it
continue.
wasn't going to be like an aggressive or mean response. It was just going to
Just like,
be I could
oh.
see that he would be affected by it because he knew that we would be losing some income.
Mhm.
So anyways,
And you guys at that point recently, like within like a few
Oh,
months,
yeah.
had gotten into a new house.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you know.
So I come up to him and I'm talking to him and I was like,
No pressure, right?
yeah, I was praying a lot about
Yeah.
it. I was like, Lord, please just show me grace in those moments, you know,
Mhm.
like, and it's crazy, like, how transformative his response was.
Mhm.
Like, I was expecting something and got something totally different. He was so supportive, and if that's what you feel like you need to do and you feel like God is calling you to do, we need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, okay.
Okay, girl.
But then at the same time, like, I felt this release. It's like I had been holding it up.
Mm-hmm.
But after I got the reassurance from him that he was okay with it,
Yeah.
then I felt like I could let my guard down and
Mhm.
tell him I'm not okay with it.
Right,
Like-
right. You're like, I'm actually not okay with this right
Well, I'm
now.
glad you're okay with it because I'm not. Like, and I started crying. That was one of
Yeah.
the times that I cried
Yeah.
because I was like, I don't know that I want to leave my job. Like, I love
Mhm.
my job.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I want to do that. And I even told him, like, I could I could do the podcast and still work
Mhm.
there. And he was like, one of his things that he said was like, well, can you do a podcast, work, and be a good mom?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a nice change of pace, his response. And
Yeah.
it was like really gracious. And I could see the Lord in that moment as
Yeah.
well. So, but what's crazy about that is that same Wednesday when I had that, like I said, it was in the afternoon, and it was around 2 to 4 that I had
Somewhere
this
around there,
client.
yeah.
And the Lord said, like, your time is done here. And Taylor actually has something that fits in this exact time on that day.
So, gosh, it's just like when you came over today, I was like, do you remember around what time in the afternoon that was?
Yeah.
And you're like, it was maybe like around 2 to 4. And I was like, okay, that's funny. And I'm like sitting there
Yeah.
thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, because
There's even more details revealed.
there's more details in that. I'm assuming a 2 to 3 hour window that
Yeah.
happened there. And because essentially, you know, like you would be losing your income that
Mhm.
you were getting from your
Mhm.
job. And at that exact same time, we were having discussions, literally almost that exact same time. I want to say, I thought it was like around 3 to 5
Mhm.
that I was meeting with my parents, and Scott was also there too, where we felt a need in our church for somebody to come alongside and help Scott and I in the worship ministry. And Nick, you know, I don't know if he'd mentioned it to you, but Nick offhandedly said, you know, like, I feel like I'm supposed to be here with you guys, but I don't know why, and I
Yeah.
don't know when.
For like months leading
Yeah.
up to that point, he
Yeah.
had been battling this decision back and forth. Like, he
Mhm.
felt like he was called to your church.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But he wasn't ready to say yes. And then go
Mhm.
ahead.
And so anyway, so he had I mean, this had already been kind of going on for like months.
Yeah.
And because there would always be times it's like, man, I just wish I could just come alongside you and just help and be there and do this with you guys. And he'd been saying it, like
Yeah.
little comments offhandedly. And so we were meeting with my parents, and they were just like, okay, do you feel like Nick would be ready to come along on a part-time basis to help you guys out? And so they were kind of discussing, you know, what we can and can't do financially, you know?
Mhm.
And so long story short, without going into a lot of details,
You had that same conversation.
we had that same conversation at the same exact time where the Lord was telling you, hey, your time is done here. And you're like, well, there goes my income.
Mhm.
And the exact same time, the Lord was already aligning things to be taken care of for you guys in a totally different way, that the Lord had already been talking to Nick for months of like,
Mhm.
hey, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know you want to do this, you know? And so that is like, and when you said it was that, and I remember you had actually texted me that Wednesday saying like, I felt like the Lord's telling me my time here is done. And I can't remember if you actually said you were nervous about it,
Mhm.
or if I just was feeling the vibes that you were nervous about
Yeah.
it because of like income being a thing.
Income
you know?
wasn't really on my heart, but
Yeah.
I knew it would be on Nick's.
Yes.
So I didn't care so much because I knew we would be okay.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I knew that he would care, and that made me nervous.
Yes, yeah. And so I knew it was something along those lines that
Yeah.
it was somewhere in there, and I couldn't remember if it was actually what you said in the text or if it was implied.
Yeah.
And or if it was just like the Holy Spirit just kind of letting me know. Like
Yeah.
maybe that was something. I can't remember. I'd have to go through our text, and that would take me an eternity
Yeah.
to find that. But I'll find it at some point. And I was so tempted to say in that moment, because we'd already had that conversation. My
Yeah.
parents actually just walked out the door when you sent that text. So my parents left.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, well, we're going to meet with Nick tomorrow and see if this is something he feels led to do.
I have chills. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, so my parents walked out the door,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when your text came in.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh my gosh. And I so much wanted to be like, the Lord already has it figured out, so it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
But I also didn't want to like say that because it still needed to be yours and Nick's decision,
Yeah.
you know? And because while I would say that I'm close to Nick, I knew a lot of the details in his life.
Mhm.
I don't want to be the person that says like, hey, I feel like you should do this, when I just needed to let the Lord speak and
Yeah.
just like let the Lord handle it, you know?
Yeah.
And because I think sometimes we try to like force hands on stuff like that. I'm like, Lord, you just do it, you know? And so it was just one of those things. I just wanted to be like, it's all good. Like,
Yeah.
I really wanted to say exactly what was going on,
Yeah.
you know, that we kind of knew in part, but we didn't know it was a done deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like, I don't want to be the person that's like, well, go ahead and just put your nail in the coffin on that decision to leave your job because of blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of just wanted to see what God would do, and it was just, the timing was just so crazy.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, like within that 3-hour window,
Mm-hmm.
on the same exact day, something else was going on that you had no idea that was going on.
And so, like, the Lord already had all that figured out.
Yeah. So he stressed about it, but he already had it figured. Like, he already had it figured out.
Oh man, it's crazy, the details, you guys, and like, just even what has happened still, like,
oh gosh,
leading up from that last moment to now, it's like there's still, he's working in so many details like that. He's continuing to do those details, especially when thinking about these next couple of episodes that you're about to hear. There's so many fine details in those podcasts that were not created by us, that was purely created by the Lord, just like what's happening
and we
here.
realize it more so in hindsight.
Yeah,
we see it in hindsight. We don't see it necessarily when it's happening. But sometimes we do, but it's so much, and we can look back and we're reflecting, we're like, my gosh, God, like, oh my gosh. Like, so crazy.
Just know that, like, the way that the Lord is speaking in these stories, or this testimony of how the podcast came to be, every little detail like that, he's putting the same energy into this podcast in the episodes that you're listening to. He's working out the fine details, and he's speaking things the same way that he spoke things in this testimony. So that's pretty much it. Like,
that is literally the crazy whirlwind of this, because I say
pretty much it. Like,
that
wasn't enough. It wasn't enough.
That's pretty much it. And it was, I mean, really, truly, because there was like so many people like, so how long have you been thinking about this? I'm like, oh, I haven't.
Yeah.
How long have you been thinking? Oh, I haven't.
Yeah.
What? Well, like, you know.
We actually thought the opposite, that we would never be ones to do podcasts.
Oh, gosh, no. And like, because and the first episode that we ever recorded that we aren't posting.
Yeah.
We're just like, wow, we say like and so much. And like, so part of us wanted to try and polish that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, while we may get more polished over time just because we get used to it.
Yeah.
We didn't really want to change who we were.
Yeah.
Because this is something that, as we kind of released in our trailer, you know, a few weeks ago, that it's like, this is literally something the Lord just like kind of placed in our lap. And
yeah,
we weren't planning on this, and this is just what happened.
Yeah.
And like little moments of where we couldn't rest, or the Lord felt like he was prompting us to do things. Like, it was in the everyday moments of saying yes.
Yeah.
You know?
And I want to challenge you guys to, like, thinking about this in this moment. Like, you know, we're probably going to say things at times that maybe you don't agree with, or maybe you don't understand.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're trying to figure it out for yourself. But I want to challenge you to let the Lord speak to you in those moments where you feel like conflicted. Ask the Lord what he is saying and what he wants you to hear. And if you aren't sure about us and what we're saying, go back to him and ask him, Lord, is this true? And then let him reveal that to you.
Right. Because
we are confident that the Lord is speaking through us and that he is using us to say something to you specifically. And we are praying before every podcast that we wouldn't say our own words, that it wouldn't be our own agenda, but it would be God's.
Yeah.
And so know that, but if there ever comes a moment where you are conflicted, just go to him. Like, we understand already that people are probably not going to agree with some of the things that we say, but we're
And
inviting.
it's not that we want to be controversial.
No.
That's not it at all. No. It's just something that.
But also,
I can't even
Jesus is a
explain it.
controversial Jesus.
Yes,
like,
yes.
He doesn't settle.
It reminds me of this series that we did at our church, like actually this time last year, and it's so crazy that you bring that up.
Yeah.
Like talking about how Jesus in some senses was controversial. Like this time last year, our church was doing a series on the controversial king.
Yeah.
And literally,
Yeah.
it was Jesus. It was Jesus.
But our goal isn't to
our
rattle
goal is
you
not
up.
Controversy. No.
No. Our goal is not to upset you. Our goal is to speak whatever God is speaking. So if it's something that you're conflicted with, like I've said,
you're not trying to beat a dead horse.
Yeah, we're not trying to beat a dead horse here, but you know, like just go back to the Lord. Like let him speak the truth to you and let him tell you what he thinks. But yeah, that's it.
That's it for today. And I'm
Yep.
so happy that you were able to really go through. We were able to go through all of those details where
Yeah.
we couldn't make this up and this wasn't even on our radar, but the Lord he just did it.
Yeah.
He just did it, you
Yeah.
know? And
We're
Wow.
so excited for
Yes.
Sunday. We cannot wait to release these things to you and for you to hear what the Lord is saying. They're very powerful first three. And so just prepare your hearts for it. Ask God to just renew your minds and let him speak to you through these.
And there was something that you had posted on our social media
Yeah.
that I do want to hit on is that we had posted a link to a song
Yeah.
that, you know, there are some things that when we're talking about on this podcast, there are things that we feel the Lord wants to say, but we sometimes can be a little bit timid and a little bit afraid to say. But we had talked about how the song was on our hearts
Yeah.
recently, and it's like there was so much that it's like, okay, you know what, Lord, like let your spirit just indwell us and let your spirit just open our eyes and ears to what you're trying to do. And so
yeah.
if you haven't seen it on our social media,
Yeah.
we would highly recommend, or we don't want to say highly recommend, but we would love it if you would listen to the song that has been heavy on our hearts.
Yeah.
And it's been heavy on our hearts, but yet it's been such an encouragement at the same time.
Yeah.
And it is Let Your Glory Fall by Carrie Job. And we've just been kind of having that on repeat.
Yeah.
And at least it's been on repeat in my home and in my car.
Yeah.
As we're getting closer.
Yeah.
Just, you know what, Lord, let this be for you, and let whatever we say be his words, and the words that we say be part of maybe somebody's revival or
Yeah.
their call to freedom in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
Sunday.
All right. Well,
Sunday.
we will see you guys or talk to you guys soon, and anxious to hear your feedback on our podcast from Sunday. But have a good rest of your day, guys.
Bye.